The light in that ballroom wasn't just bright, it was aggressive. It bounced off every diamond, every polished silver tray, every fake smile in the room until my head throbbed. I stood there, clutching a glass of mineral water like it was a lifeline, wearing a dress that cost more than my husband's first car, a dress he didn't even know I owned. I saw him before he saw me. Julian, my husband of 7 years. The man who told me he was in Chicago for a high-stakes merger that couldn't wait. He looked incredible in his tuxedo, his jawline sharp, his gait confident. But he wasn't alone. Tucked under his arm was a woman who looked like a walking sunset, gold silk, bronze skin, and a laugh that sounded like breaking glass. I watched them from the shadows of the mezzanine. I felt a coldness spread from my chest to my fingertips. It wasn't just the cheating. It was the audacity. He was at the Vanderbilt Diamond Gala. My gala. The event my family had hosted for 3 generations. And he had no idea. To him, I was Elena, the quiet wife who stayed home in the suburbs, managed the household accounts, and lived off the modest allowance he graciously provided from his hard-earned salary at the firm. He didn't know that the firm he worked for was a subsidiary of a holding company. He didn't know that holding company was owned by a trust. And he certainly didn't know that I was the sole trustee. I watched him lean in and whisper something into her ear. She giggled, tapping his chest with a manicured finger. That finger held a ring, a marquise-cut diamond. I recognized the setting instantly. It was from our private vault. He had stolen from my heritage to deck out his mistress. Is everything to your liking, Ms. Vanderbilt? I didn't turn around. I knew the voice. It was Marcus, my head of security. He was the only one in this room who knew the truth. To everyone else, I was just a guest. To Julian, I was a ghost. The catering is excellent, Marcus, I whispered, my voice steady despite the hurricane in my stomach. But there's a pest in the room. 2 of them, actually. Shall I have them removed? No, I said, a slow, dark heat rising in my throat. I want them to stay. I want them to have the best night of their lives. I want them to feel like they own the world, because by tomorrow morning, they won't even own the clothes on their backs. I walked down the stairs, blending into the crowd. I caught his scent as I passed, his signature cologne. It made me want to gag. 7 years. I had given this man 7 years of my life, my support, my secrets. I had dimmed my lights so he could shine, thinking he needed to feel like the provider. I had played the part of the plain Jane, heiress, hiding the billions because I wanted to be loved for me, not my bank account. What a joke. I followed them toward the VIP lounge. Julian was flashing a gold card, my card, to the usher. He looked so smug, so entitled. I stood just a few feet away, hidden by a marble pillar, watching him buy a bottle of vintage Cristal with money I had earned while he was sleeping. The betrayal wasn't a single blow, it was 1,000 tiny cuts. Every "I love you" he texted while he was with her. Every anniversary he forgot because of work. It all came rushing back, a tidal wave of wasted time. But as I watched him toast to his new life, I realized something. I wasn't a victim. I was the architect. And it was time to tear the building down. Wait until he sees who's holding the gavel at the end of the night. You ever feel like you're watching a movie of your own life, and you're screaming at the screen for the main character to wake up? That's been me for 3 years. 3 years of late nights at the office. 3 years of business trips to cities where his GPS mysteriously stopped working. I sat in the corner of the VIP lounge, my face obscured by a lace mask. The theme of the gala was Masquerade of the Elite. How fitting. Julian and his sunset girl, whose name I found out was Chloe, were sitting at a table mere feet away. "Julian, baby," Chloe cooed, her voice carrying over the soft cello music. "This is incredible. How did you get invites to the Vanderbilt Gala? I heard people wait years for this." Julian leaned back, puffing out his chest. "It's all about who you know, Chloe. I've been doing some private consulting for the estate. They owe me a few favors." I nearly choked on my drink. Consulting? He was a mid-level analyst. The only thing he consulted on was which tie matched a shirt. The lies were so effortless, so practiced. It made me wonder if I had ever known him at all. Did I marry a man, or did I marry a performance? I remembered the day we met. Rain-soaked streets in London. He had offered me his umbrella. He seemed so genuine, so hardworking. He told me he hated snobs and old money. He said he wanted to build a life from scratch. And I, the girl who had been surrounded by leeches since birth, fell for it. I hid my identity. I told him I was a librarian on a scholarship. I wanted that simple life he talked about. And for a while it was beautiful. Or maybe I just wanted it to be. So, Chloe said, twisting the diamond ring on her finger. When are you going to leave her? You said she's unstable. You said she's been draining your savings with her. What did you call it? Her imaginary illnesses? My hand shook. Unstable? Imaginary illnesses? I had never been sick a day in our marriage. I realized then that he wasn't just cheating. He was laying the groundwork for a divorce where he'd come out as the long-suffering saint. He was painting me as a burden to justify his exit. Soon, babe, Julian whispered, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. The divorce papers are already drafted. I just need to make sure the assets are protected. She doesn't deserve a dime of what I've built. She's a weight around my neck, Chloe. You're my oxygen. Oxygen.
Right.
He was suffocating, and I was the one paying for the tank. I stood up. I couldn't sit there anymore. The air in the lounge felt thick with their deceit. I walked toward the balcony, the cool night air hitting my face like a slap. I looked out over the city. My city. My phone buzzed in my clutch. A text from my lawyer. The transfer is complete. He just signed the final authorization for the merger you requested. He thinks he's moving the firm's funds to a private offshore account. In reality, he just signed over his entire power of attorney to the Vanderbilt Trust. He's broke, Elena. He just doesn't know it yet. A cold smile touched my lips. Julian thought he was playing chess, but he hadn't even realized I owned the board, the pieces, and the room we were sitting in. I turned back to the room. The main event was about to begin. The unveiling of the Star of the North, a 100-carat diamond that hadn't been seen in public for 50 years. My grandfather's prize. The lights dimmed. The announcer took the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, the voice boomed. Please welcome the woman of the hour, the visionary behind tonight's gala and the owner of the Vanderbilt legacy. Julian stood up, clapping, looking toward the stage with greedy eyes, probably hoping to catch a glimpse of a decrepit old woman he could suck up to for a promotion. I took off my mask, handed my glass to a passing waiter, and stepped into the spotlight. The spotlight found me before the sound did. It was a physical weight, pressing me down. But I didn't buckle. I stepped forward, the heels of my shoes clicking with a sharp, metallic rhythm on the stage floor. The music, a sweeping, dramatic crescendo, seemed to be following my lead. Ladies and gentlemen, the announcer said, please welcome the woman who made all this possible, the true heiress to the Vanderbilt legacy, Ms. Elena Vanderbilt Carter. I didn't look at the crowd. I only looked at one table, Julian's table. The change was instantaneous. It was better than any performance I could have hoped for. The smug grin, the confident posture, it all evaporated. He stood frozen, his mouth half open, like a puppet whose strings had been cut. Chloe, the sunset girl, looked from me to him, her eyes wide with confusion, her grip on that stolen diamond ring tightening. I walked to the center stage, directly under the crystal chandelier. The silence in the room was deafening. I could hear my own breath. I could hear Julian's. Good evening, I said into the microphone, my voice smoother than I thought possible. My name is Elena, and for the last 7 years, most of you have known me simply as Julian Carter's wife. The quiet one, the invisible one, the one who stayed home. I saw him flinch. I let the words hang there, heavy and accusatory. Tonight is a night of celebration, I continued, my gaze sweeping over the audience, but always returning to him. It's a night to unveil the truth. We celebrate the Star of the North, a diamond that has been hidden from the world for too long. But we also celebrate clarity. I looked directly at Julian. He was trying to shrink, trying to disappear into the crowd. I wouldn't let him. You see, Some things are beautiful only on the surface, I said, my tone hardening. A diamond requires immense pressure and time to form its clarity, its strength, its value. Other things, other people use a sparkling exterior to hide a core that is deeply, fundamentally flawed, fractured, hollow. The crowd knew something was wrong. The energy in the room shifted from polite admiration to tense curiosity. They sensed the predator in me, and they were ready for the kill. My husband, Julian, told me tonight that he was in Chicago. He's here. My husband told me he was building a life from scratch. He's here, living off a legacy he despises but secretly envies. He told me he was my partner. He's here, standing next to a woman who is not his wife, celebrating with my family's wealth while planning to leave me with imaginary illnesses. I watched his face go from pale to red to ashen. The shame was there, but so was the rage. He was trapped. Julian, I said, my voice echoing, come on up. I think you owe our guests and your consultant an explanation for how you managed to navigate this complex world so effortlessly. The invitation wasn't a request. It was an execution. He didn't move. He looked paralyzed. A few people near him started to whisper, then point. The murmur grew. A security guard nudged him, urging him forward. He looked like a man walking to the gallows. He had to cross that long ballroom, under the gaze of everyone he had lied to, everyone he had tried to impress. It was the longest walk of his life. And for me, it was the shortest. Every step he took toward the stage was a step toward my freedom. He arrived at the base of the stairs, looking up at me. This wasn't the man I had married. This was a cornered animal. Up you come, Julian, I said, a cruel smile touching my lips. The spotlight is yours. He ascended the stairs, his movements clumsy. He reached the stage, standing 5 feet away from me. The light on him was now a spotlight on his failure. He was shivering. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. He was completely, utterly silent. Nothing, I asked. No clever lies? No private consulting stories? How about we talk about the merger you authorized today? The one where you shifted all your power of attorney and every asset you thought you had directly back into my hands. I saw the realization hit him. It wasn't a gradual understanding, it was a physical blow. He staggered, catching the edge of the announcer's podium. The man who had been my husband, the man I had loved and protected, was gone. All that was left was this broken, humiliated figure. Congratulations, Julian, I said, leaning in. You finally made it to the top. This is the closest you'll ever get to the Vanderbilt empire. And now, I motioned to Marcus, who was standing by the wings. The guards will show you the exit. It's been real. I watched him be escorted off the stage, past a room full of people who now knew him as a fraud. I had my clarity, but the diamond wasn't the only thing being unveiled tonight. The gala was over. The Star of the North was back in its vault, and the Mistress was nowhere to be found. I was back in the suburbs, in the large, empty house that had felt like a tomb but now felt like a throne. The silence was the sweetest sound I'd ever heard. My phone had been ringing for 2 days. Julian, my mother-in-law, even Chloe had called once, probably trying to negotiate the return of that stolen ring. I hadn't answered. Not yet. My lawyer, David, arrived with a thick stack of papers. The divorce was moving at lightning speed. It turns out, when you own the judges and the banks, the law works quite efficiently. He's desperate, Elena, David said, setting his briefcase down. He's been trying to sell everything. The car, the furniture, the dog. I felt a sharp pang in my chest. Buster. Our golden retriever. I hadn't thought about Buster in all of this. Julian would sell him just to spite me. He won't, I said, a coldness creeping back into my voice. The dog is in the trust. I made sure of it years ago. Well, that's a relief. But he's not just broke, Elena. He's exposed. His reputation at the firm is destroyed. No one will hire him. He's toxic. I paced the living room. He deserves it. He does. But men like him, they don't just collapse. They mutate. They find a new host. A new plan. He's smart, Elena. He knows your vulnerabilities. Vulnerabilities. That word twisted in my stomach. The vulnerability was my heart. It was the part of me that had once believed his lies, the part of me that still, despite everything, felt a tiny flicker of sorrow for the man he used to be. Or the man I had imagined him to be. But there was another vulnerability. My business. Specifically, an upcoming merger between Vanderbilt Carter and a global technology firm. It was my legacy project. My masterstroke. And Julian knew all the details. You think he'll try to sabotage the deal? I asked. He doesn't have the leverage anymore. But he has knowledge. Secrets. Your proprietary formulas. Your marketing strategies. Everything. I looked out the window. My phone buzzed again. This time, I answered. Elena. His voice was different. No charming tone. No nervous stutter. Just a flat, dead calm. Julian. I hope you enjoyed your moment on stage, Queen Elena. He spat the name. You think you've won. You think you've buried me. You buried yourself, Julian. The only thing I did was provide the shovel. You always were so literal. Elena, you didn't just take my money and my pride. You took my future. And for that, I'm going to take yours.
How?
You don't have a dime. You don't have friends. The whole city saw who you are. He laughed, a dry, humorless sound. You think I was the only one in that room with secrets? You think I was the only one playing a role? The world you live in is all performance, Elena. And you've just invited me to the main stage. He hung up, the threat hang in the air, cold and definitive. I looked at David. He looked as worried as I felt. Julian wasn't going to just fade away. He was going to use the same weapons I had used against him. My identity, my secrets, and my world. But he was going to turn them against me. I sat back on the sofa, clutching my phone. The victory from the gala was already starting to feel hollow. The war hadn't ended on that stage. It had only just begun. A knock at the door. Not Julian. Marcus, my head of security. He didn't say a word, but his expression told me everything. He handed me his tablet, showing a live news feed. A press conference was starting. Julian was standing at a podium, flanked by two lawyers I didn't recognize. And standing behind them, looking like she'd just inherited the world, was Chloe. The title on the news banner made my blood run cold. Whistleblower exposes the dark truth behind Vanderbilt Carter legacy. I watched the screen, paralyzed. Julian looked completely different. Clean-shaven, clear-eyed, wearing a simple but tailored suit. The transformation was unsettling. It was the face of a man who believed his own lies. My name is Julian Carter, he began, his voice surprisingly deep and resonant on the recording. For 7 years, I was married to the current CEO of Vanderbilt Carter, Elena Vanderbilt. I loved her with all my heart. But the woman you saw on that stage 2 nights ago, that is not the woman I knew. The crowd of reporters leaned forward. The camera zoomed in on his face, catching every flicker of sorrow he was projecting. Tonight, I'm not here to talk about my marriage. That's a private tragedy. I'm here to talk about the truth. The dark truth behind the wealth that this city admires. My wife's company, Vanderbilt Carter, did not achieve its success through vision or legacy. It was built on systemic exploitation, fraud, and illegal offshore tax evasion. My heart pounded against my ribs. It was a lie, a total, desperate lie. But in the court of public opinion, a lie, when told with enough conviction, can become the truth. He has no proof, David stated, looking from me to the screen. This is libel. We can sue him into the ground. Look at them, David, I whispered, pointing to the screen. The reporters weren't just taking notes. They were nodding. The public loves to see the elite fall. He was giving them what they wanted. On the screen, Julian was holding up a stack of documents. This is evidence I collected over the years, hidden from my wife. It documents illegal shipping routes, falsified labor reports from our international subsidiaries, and a shadow account used to bribe foreign officials. The documents were, I knew, clever fakes, but they looked real enough to prompt a global investigation. Julian, a reporter yelled, your wife publicly humiliated you. Is this just revenge? Julian paused, a master of timing. He looked down, as if composed himself, before looking back up with a sorrowful expression. I wish it were that simple. When I saw the woman I loved turn into whatever that performance was on stage, I realized I had been complicit in a lie. I couldn't be that man anymore. This isn't revenge. It's an awakening. I'm doing this because I can't let the world be deceived by her mask, like I was. His gaze found the camera. It felt like he was looking right through the screen at me. And for you, Elena, I know you're watching. You've had your fun. But the truth is a diamond you can't hide in a vault forever. The feed cut off. Silence. David stared at the tablet. Marcus's jaw was clenched. The victory from the gala felt like a distant memory. Julian had found the one thing I couldn't simply buy my way out of, a public scandal that could destroy everything my family had built. He's smart, Marcus said, his voice grave. He didn't just attack you. He attacked the source of your power, your company, your legacy. And he did it with the most dangerous weapon of all, a partial truth, David added. He can easily create forged documents that look authentic. The merger, it's dead in the water, Elena. The global tech firm won't touch us with this cloud over our heads. I felt the weight of my own name, my family's legacy, pressing down on me. Julian hadn't just exposed me. He trapped me in his own web of deception. If I fought him publicly, I'd just be feeding the circus. If I did nothing, my company would collapse. What are we going to do? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. David paced the room, already typing furiously on his phone. We need a PR firm that specializes in crisis management. We need a team of forensic accountants to dismantle his claims. And we need to prepare for a multi-year legal battle. My phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a call. It was a message from an unknown number. One mask off, another one on. I'm enjoying this performance, Elena. How about you? My hand trembled. The game had shifted. I wasn't the powerful heir anymore. I was a target, and Julian was the one pulling the strings. Marcus took the phone from my hand. We need to clear the house. It's not safe. Safe. That word seemed so abstract now. Safe from what? From Julian? From my own company falling apart? From the world seeing through my mask? We spent the next hours preparing to move. Marcus was already organizing a safe house, but the idea of fleeing my own home felt like a surrender. As I packed a small bag, I caught my reflection in the mirror. I didn't see the confident heiress from the gala. I saw a scared woman, the girl who had wanted that simple life. I had built an empire to protect myself, and now that very empire was the weapon being used against me. Wait until he finds out that I'm not just an heiress. I'm a fighter, and I'm about to play his game, but with rules he can't even begin to understand. I didn't go to the safe house. If I ran now, I was essentially handing Julian the keys to the kingdom. Instead, I retreated to the one place he didn't know existed, the archives. It was a windowless room in the sub-basement of the Vanderbilt headquarters, filled with physical ledgers, original deeds, and the hard drives of every computer the company had used since the 90s. Marcus stood outside the heavy steel door. Inside, the air was cold and smelled of ozone and old paper. This was where the real history lived, the stuff that wasn't digitized, the stuff that couldn't be hacked or forged. David, I need you to find every piece of paper Julian ever touched at the firm, I said into my headset. Every expense report, every memo, every private consulting project he claimed to work on. Elena, we're drowning in the whistleblower allegations. The board is meeting in 6 hours. They're already discussing your removal. Let them talk, I snapped, my eyes scanning a shelf of old files. Julian thinks he's clever because he forged evidence of my corruption. But he forgot one thing. To forge a lie, you have to use a grain of truth. He's using actual company data as a template. I just need to find the original source of the data he's twisting. I spent hours under the hum of fluorescent lights. My eyes burned. My fingers were stained with ink. Then I found it. A folder labeled Project Icarus. It was a small, experimental environmental initiative the company had funded 4 years ago. It had failed and been quietly shuttered. But as I looked at the signatures on the funding requests, my blood turned to ice. It wasn't my signature. It wasn't my father's. It was a perfect digital forgery of mine. And the bank account the funds had been diverted to? It wasn't an offshore tax haven for the Vanderbilts. It was a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands. The owner of that shell company? Not Julian. It was his mother. The sweet, humble woman who had cried at our wedding, telling me how lucky her son was to find a simple girl like me. They had been stealing from me since before the wedding. The affair with Chloe wasn't the beginning of the betrayal. It was just the latest chapter. Julian hadn't just married me for love. He had been mining me like a resource for nearly a decade. Marcus, I called out, my voice trembling with a new kind of rage. I need a direct line to the SEC. And get me the address of that boutique apartment Julian just moved Chloe into. What are you doing, Elena? He wanted a performance, I said, slamming the folder shut. I'm going to give him a tragedy. He thinks he's the whistleblower? I'm going to show the world that he's the leak. I realized then that Julian's plan wasn't just to destroy me. It was to create enough chaos that he could disappear with the millions he'd already siphoned off. He was using the scandal as a smokescreen for his own heist. I checked the time. The board meeting was in 4 hours. I didn't need a PR firm. I needed a mirror. I needed to show Julian exactly what he had become. I grabbed my coat and headed for the elevator. It was time to pay a visit to the other woman. The apartment was at the top of a glass tower overlooking the park. It was the kind of place people kill for. I walked past the doorman, who didn't dare stop a Vanderbilt, and let myself in using the master key the building's owner, a family friend, had provided. Chloe was there, sitting on a white leather sofa, sipping wine and looking at a floor-to-ceiling view of the city. She looked like a queen in a palace she didn't build. When she saw me, she didn't scream. She didn't even look surprised. She just set her glass down and sighed. I figured you'd show up eventually. Julian said you were predictable. Predictable? I walked into the room, my boots echoing on the marble. Is that what he calls it when someone catches him stealing millions from their family? Chloe laughed. It was a hollow, brittle sound. You think this is about money? Elena, you have so much of it you don't even know what to do with it. Julian, he wanted respect. He wanted to be the one holding the gavel for once. By stealing? By lying about labor violations and tax fraud. I stepped closer, my shadows stretching across the expensive rug. He's using you, Chloe. You're the face of his new life, but you're also his primary witness. When the SEC comes knocking, and they will, who do you think he's going to throw under the bus first? She faltered. Just for a second. He loves me. He gave me this. She gestured to the room. He gave you a gilded cage bought with stolen money, I said, tossing the Project Icarus file onto the coffee table. Open it. Look at the signatures. Look at the bank accounts. He didn't put this apartment in your name, did he? It's under his mother's shell company. If he goes down, you have nothing. If he runs, you have nothing. She reached for the file, her manicured fingers trembling. As she read, the color drained from her face. She wasn't just a mistress. She was a pawn. She saw the dates. He had been setting up these accounts years before he even met her. He told me he was building this for us, she whispered. He was building it for him. I corrected. And right now, he's at a press club, telling the world that I am the criminal. He's making sure that when the investigation happens, all eyes are on me while he cleans out the rest of the accounts and vanishes. I leaned over her, my voice low and dangerous. I can help you, Chloe. I can make sure you don't go to prison for his crimes. But you have to give me the one thing he hasn't destroyed yet. What? The digital key to his private server. I know he keeps it on a drive. He's too paranoid to put it in the cloud. Chloe looked at a small, unassuming bookshelf near the window. Her eyes lingered on a hollowed-out book. I didn't wait. I grabbed the book and pulled out a sleek black flash drive. He's going to kill me, she breathed. No, I said, heading for the door. He's going to be too busy trying to explain to the FBI why his evidence against me is actually a roadmap of his own embezzlement. Thanks for the drink, Chloe. Keep the apartment. You're going to need a place to stay while you look for a lawyer. I walked out of the building, the drive heavy in my pocket. I had the truth. Now, I just had to survive long enough to tell it. I got into my car and dialed Marcus. The board meeting is starting in 30 minutes. Tell them to clear the agenda. We're having a screening. The boardroom was a tomb of dark wood and judging eyes. 12 men and women, the titans of industry who had served my father, sat around the table. They looked at me with a mix of pity and disgust. To them, I was the girl who had let a nobody infiltrate the fortress. Elena, the chairman said, his voice cold. The allegations brought forward by Mr. Carter are grave. The stock price has plummeted 20% since the press conference. The global tech merger is officially on hold. We have no choice but to ask for your immediate resignation. I didn't sit down. I stood at the head of the table, my hands resting on the back of the chair. I understand your concerns, I said, my voice projecting a calm I didn't entirely feel. But before you take a vote, I'd like to show you a piece of consulting Julian Carter has been doing for this company. I plugged the drive into the central console. The massive screen at the end of the room flickered to life. It wasn't a spreadsheet. It was a video. It was a recording from the hidden camera Julian had installed in our home office, the one he thought only he could access. It showed him sitting at my desk, late at night, carefully scanning my signature and using a sophisticated software program to overlay it onto the fraudulent documents he'd presented to the press. The room went silent. You could hear the clicking of the clock on the wall. Then the audio kicked in. Julian was on the phone. Yeah, the Vanderbilt signatures are perfect. The SEC won't be able to tell the difference. Once the scandal hits and the board pushes her out, I'll trigger the final transfer from the Heiress fund. We'll be in Zurich before the first subpoena is even typed. The chairman's face went from pale to a deep, royal purple. But that's not all, I said, switching the screen to a map of bank transfers. Julian wasn't just framing me. He was framing you. Look at the routing numbers. He's been tagging these illegal transfers with your digital signatures, too. If I go down, every single person in this room goes down with me. The panic in the room was palpable. These people didn't care about my marriage or my feelings, but they cared about their own skins. What do you want, Elena? One of the board members asked, her voice shaking. I want total autonomy, I said. No more oversight. No more tradition. I'm going to dismantle the old structure and rebuild this company from the ground up. And I want you to authorize a private security detail to bring Julian Carter to me. Not the police. Me. The chairman looked at the screen, then at me. He saw the fire in my eyes, the Vanderbilt fire he thought had died with my father. The vote is unanimous, he whispered. Do what you have to do. I walked out of the boardroom, the doors swinging shut behind me. I felt a surge of power, so intense it was almost dizzying. I had my company back. I had the evidence. But Julian was still out there, and he was a cornered animal with nothing left to lose. I checked my watch. He was scheduled to give another exclusive interview in an hour at a local news station. He thinks he's going to be on the 6 o'clock news. He's right. But it's not going to be the interview he planned. The television studio felt like a laboratory, sterile, cold, and blindingly white. I watched from the darkened control booth as Julian sat in the hot seat, getting his makeup touched up. He looked remarkably composed. He was practicing his somber hero face in a small hand mirror. It was nauseating. He genuinely believed he was the protagonist of this story. 3 minutes to air, Mr. Carter, the producer called out. Julian nodded, adjusting his tie, a silk one I'd bought him for our 5th anniversary. I turned to the technician sitting next to me. Is the feed ready? Ready, Ms. Vanderbilt. We've hijacked the digital signal. The moment he starts talking, the broadcast switches to the director's cut. I looked at the monitor. My heart was thumping against my ribs, but my hands were steady. This was the moment of no return. I wasn't just defending my company anymore. I was reclaiming my soul from a man who had tried to hollow me out. The red-on-air light flickered to life. The interviewer, a woman known for her gotcha style, leaned in. Mr. Carter, since your last press conference, the world has been waiting for more proof. You've made some staggering claims about Elena Vanderbilt and the corruption within her empire. Do you have anything new for us tonight? Julian took a deep breath, his eyes glistening with rehearsed tears. I do. It breaks my heart to do this, but the public has a right to know. I have evidence here of a direct payoff to. Actually, Julian, I said, my voice cutting through the studio speakers like a blade. Why don't we show them the real evidence? Julian froze. He looked around the studio, eyes darting wildly toward the rafters. Elena? Where are you? I'm everywhere, Julian, I said. I'm in the walls of the house you tried to steal. I'm in the accounts you tried to drain. And right now, I'm the one controlling your narrative. The giant screen behind Julian, the one meant to show his evidence, suddenly flared to life. But it wasn't a spreadsheet. It was the footage from Chloe's apartment. It showed him, just 3 hours earlier, frantically packing a suitcase with stacks of cash and several passports. It showed him screaming at Chloe, calling her a worthless distraction when she asked where they were going. Then the screen split. On the other side, the bank records from his mother's shell company scrolled by in a blur of red text, highlighting every cent stolen from the Vanderbilt Trust. The interviewer gasped. The camera crew stopped moving. Julian stood up, knocking his chair over. This is a fabrication. She's hacking the feed. This is exactly the kind of corporate overreach I've been talking about. Sit down, Julian, I said, walking out from the shadows of the control booth and onto the studio floor. I was wearing the same dress from the gala, the one that cost more than his car. I wanted him to see the version of me he couldn't touch. The police are outside, I said, my voice echoing in the silent studio. But they aren't here for me. They're here for the man who committed 34 counts of wire fraud, identity theft, and embezzlement. They're here for the man who thought he could hide behind a mask of morality while he gutted a legacy he didn't build. Julian looked at the cameras, then at me. The hero mask finally cracked. His face contorted into something ugly, something feral. You think you're better than me? You were born with a silver spoon. I had to work for everything I took from you. You didn't even notice I was gone for 3 years. You were too busy playing queen to see your own husband was a stranger. I saw you, Julian, I said, stepping into his personal space. I saw exactly what you were. I just hoped I was wrong. But thank you. For the first time in 7 years, I see everything clearly. He lunged at me, his hands reaching for my throat, but Marcus was faster. As Julian was pinned to the floor, the cameras caught every second of his breakdown. The fallout was spectacular. The news didn't just report on Julian's arrest, they dissected his entire life. The whistleblower was rebranded as the Vanderbilt Vulture. Chloe disappeared into a witness protection-style anonymity, trading her testimony for a reduced sentence. The company's stock didn't just recover, it soared. People love a comeback story, and they love a woman who refuses to be a victim even more. A month later, I stood in the same ballroom where the gala had been held. It was empty now, the white sheets covering the furniture like ghosts. I was holding a small velvet box. Inside was the Star of the North. I looked at the diamond. It was beautiful, yes. It was valuable beyond measure. But as I held it, I realized it was just a rock. Its value didn't come from its carats or its clarity. It came from the fact that it had survived. It had been buried, pressured, and hidden, but it remained unchanged at its core. I realized then that my marriage hadn't been a waste of time. It was the pressure I needed to become who I was meant to be. I had spent years trying to be simple and quiet to make a small man feel big. I had tried to hide my light, so he wouldn't be blinded. Never again. I walked to the center of the room and set the diamond down on a pedestal. My life isn't about the money anymore. It's about the truth. It's about knowing that you can lose everything, your trust, your heart, your reputation, and still stand tall if you know who you are. Julian tried to use my name against me, but all he did was remind me of its power. I'm moving the headquarters to the city center. I'm starting a foundation for women who have been financially abused by their partners. I'm using the Vanderbilt name to build something that actually matters. As for Julian, he's in a cell, waiting for a trial that will likely end in a 20-year sentence. He still sends letters. He still tries to blame me. He still thinks he's the hero. But I don't read them. I don't need to. His story is over. Mine is just beginning. Life is a lot like a Diamond Gala. There are a lot of fake gems, a lot of masked faces, and a lot of stolen light. But if you look closely enough, you can always find the real thing. You just have to be willing to walk through the fire to find it. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you've lived through something similar, if you've ever had to take off your mask and fight for your truth, share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.